We're out here at Bask Bog, and this area of the property is one of the most dynamic areas of the place. Every time the water level changes or invasive species are suppressed, we get the most dynamic change I've seen. And at this point, we have a new beaver that has moved into the property and built its own lodge in the pond that was constructed early on in the formation of Bask. So now that we have a beaver involved, the beaver is essentially a hydrological engineer mixed with a worker, and what it's doing to the bog is essentially customizing it for the type of environment that the beaver wants. That also happens to be what we want in most cases. So as we go up the hill here, you'll see that the water level from the previous edition of this update, the water level has risen dramatically. And so last year when we shot this section of the bog, that cedar tree and this elm tree were on part of an island that was roughly 4 feet, maybe 3 feet below grade. And so now we have water almost up to my feet. This is in part because of the beaver coming in and engineering the way the water flowed from the seeps and the springs in the bog to the pond. So now that cedar tree there is dead. It's permanently flooded, and that's never gonna change, right? And so some of the things that happen with a bog or any ecosystem as we improve it are unforeseen, right? So we wanted to keep these cedar trees here. Once the beaver set up shop, we made a compromise, and now there's not gonna be cedars there. There's going to be carex, rushes, turtles, salamanders, and fish. And so now that this is an expanded pond, we can maintain around it and promote what naturally occurs. Since we plugged up the drainage trenches and made this back to how it was before this road was developed, we have a number of species of fish that have started in this pond. And SGI felt like this was some species of sunfish. It's got a white fin and they're pretty small, but there's quite a few of them in here. Over the winter, when this area froze over, we saw hundreds of salamanders. Probably 3 species, we're not really sure, but when the ice was transparent, we found out that we could walk to the center of the bog and see even more life. And you can see how the water is draining through. So I basically, where we're standing, I put in a trough of pure creek gravel like what we're standing on, and that allows the water to filter through without all the acidity and sediment and gunk that's in the bog. So if we didn't do this and we just let the water flow out, it would be highly acidic. And this is kind of like a natural filter, but eventually we are gonna put a culvert in here that drains at a certain level, and then the road will stay dry. I threw this tree trunk in just to track how far the water rose. And when I dropped this tree trunk in 3 months ago, it was completely above grade, no water. And if you look out into this area, you'll see that, again, the cedar tree right there is failing and it's gonna be dead soon, or if it's not already. But the sedges and all of the aquatic plants are thriving. So this will be full of all different types of life forms that used to be only in the center of the bog. So as these water levels rise, it is supporting new and different types of life. But like this cedar tree in front of me is green now, but if the water levels remain where they are, due to the beaver activity and all the rain we get, then this cedar will probably not make it either. But that's just part of the cycle of life. Eventually other trees will grow in here like sycamores and hazelnuts, and those will love the water. And so as we build Bask, we're adapting to a dynamic system. We don't really control nature, right? So this area is now sedges, salamanders, and frogs. So we haven't ID'd this lily yet, but this was not here last year, and this is a woodland lily. So this is a species that I haven't seen up until last week here at Bask. And when SGI came out, I pointed it out to him and I said, hey, what the heck is this? And it's apparently a woodland lily. And so now that we know that these are here, we can acquire more, grow them from seed, do whatever we need to add more. For right now though, we only know of one on the property, but that may change in the coming year. In this section of the bog and the creek edge, we haven't done an aggressive amount of invasive plant suppression, so there is still quite a bit of stilt grass and European pasture grasses in here. We also haven't really done away with all of the privet bushes and trees, like tree-sized privet in this section from here down to the end of the property line. This will be accomplished by volunteers this year, and we're gonna be finishing off the privet that we can see. And then once that privet is all suppressed, all the seedlings that pop up will then be taken out. And eventually, I would say within 3 years, we'll have all of the invasive trees and shrubs eradicated from the property. But it is a process. Wherever the areas have been flooded, like what's over here, these areas, the invasive plants are being suppressed by the flooding because they're not aquatic species. So all the stilt grass on this side of the road over here will eventually be killed off by the high water table. Whereas on this side, these plants will have to be mechanically removed. And we'll do that slowly but surely this year. This one's also new. So here's another meadow rue blooming on a different part of the property. And the only reason I think we're seeing this now is again because we quit bush hogging the whole property, and that yields lots of more sensitive plants. So this may have been 6 inches tall last year and kind of beat up from being mowed over. But since we suppressed the invasive species around it to some degree, it's blooming like crazy. So this is one of my favorite plants on the property, and it provides tons of nectar and pollen for everything. One of the biggest successes that we've had in the bog restoration project has been the center of the bog. So where I'm standing, this used to be completely drained of water, and now it's full of sedges and a number of medicinal and edible plants. Over there we've got broadleaf arrowhead, so that one has an edible tuber. We've got quite a few other good plants in here, especially the rushes that are blooming in the center there. We do have an invasive plant, aquatic plant back there, which I believe is called peacock feather or peacock moss. And that's incredibly difficult to remove, but we are working on that through manual removal. But this area has been completely alive with frogs, salamanders, and birds and insects ever since we changed the water flow back to how it was before. And so again, I would consider this a huge success story. We see snapping turtles, frogs, everything.